We're live, yeah.
All right, so I'll call to order this December 10th regular monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. Deb Watkins is excused, but will be calling in later. She is out of town at the moment. And Tammy Morris, the clerk, is excused for the evening.
Do we have a recorder, just in case this audio?
My fault.
Yes, we'll turn on the
No, I
recorder
didn't really
Yeah.
think he wasn't coming.
momentarily. I have one change to the agenda under the treasurer's report. 7E, we're adding a request to authorize the mayor to sign fire and EMS contracts with the towns when they come back shortly. Are there any other additions or deletions or changes to the agenda?
I had the cleaning under mine, the cleaning personnel and the Fisher agreement.
So we're also going to add a contract for a cleaner to be considered. And the Fisher Engineering addendum.
I don't know if you can take any action on this sidewalk.
Both that and the police MOU actually continue unless terminated. Was the way we worded it. I will double check. I'm pretty sure. But certainly the sidewalk one should be worded that way.
Yeah, that's.
I'll double check on the police one. Any other changes to the agenda? All right, item number 3 is an executive session. We have 2 executive sessions tonight. The first one is to deal specifically with 2 items that are going to be up for consideration in the public portion of the meeting. But there are certain aspects of it that are either privileged or subject to executive session rules. So the board is going to adjourn, so we're not kick you 2 out into the cold. The board is going to adjourn into our upstairs office, upstairs room for hopefully just a few minutes while we discuss the 2 items listed there. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining subject to the Taylor Law and police personnel.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, we are in executive session and we will be back shortly, I hope.
We'll be quick. Sorry.
Yeah.
Help yourself.
Do you want the Taylor, do you want me to bring the contract word?
Sure.
Go ahead, guys, I'll be up. Sorry. I don't want to break that. It's okay. Really, don't want. I know, but go ahead. If it bothers me, then I'm fine. I don't walk nearly as fast as any. Quiet, actually, we were both sick and we normally do like a big thing for 20-some people collected from going other places. So, we're not strangers, but, family, people whose family is either out, the way that they want to keep them, whatever. But we didn't do that this year because we had 2 of our Kenyan students were going to be with us. One had to go back to work before Thanksgiving, the other stayed through, but we got sick, and so we just stayed home and had a quiet time. But our 85-year-old next door neighbor was going to go to her son's the next day, so she was alone on Thanksgiving night, so she came over. We just had a quiet, non-turkey rest of the Thanksgiving. It was we like our meal. So you didn't have to like be cooking for 3 days. No, I mean, unfortunately, Judy was sicker than I was, and she ended up doing the cooking. Is it the flu? No, just a cold. Yeah, but it was sort of in the early days of the cold, so she was feeling pretty crappy, but she rallied and made cook for us, so that's nice. And you guys here, or
Yeah, so sometimes we have at our house too, we kind of like ask people that, place to go, or single people, or whatever. So we had a few people over, and Carolyn's family,
then nearby?
some of them live in, the other side of Moquega Heights,
Oh,
or
okay.
kind of towards there, towards the mall, and she had some cousins up from New York City.
Who are your family?
So a couple, maybe a week or so, a week or two before that, one of my sisters started this tradition, which is really nice, because everybody's got their own little family, and most everybody has kids. So she started at her house, which my mother used to do, years ago, and so had everybody over there for like a pre-Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving. So that was really fun. So and most of the family could be there.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's good. Yeah, the retirement place my parents used to live had like a Thanksgiving to which family members were invited the week before Thanksgiving, maybe the weekend before Thanksgiving, so. We used to do that for a few years. Because a lot of people really weren't in physical condition to sort of travel to their kids' homes. And sometimes they did sort of did both, but other times people were sort of in the nursing home part of this facility, just sort of get their both in and be family covered. So, but what I am more excited about is Charity is one of these Kenyon students. She graduated last May, and she was living with us while she was waiting for a year from now to be applying for the fall of 19 to apply to law school. She had graduated from Cornell, and she had taken the LSATs in the summer for law school, and but apparently did so well that when the grades were posted publicly and law schools could look at the results, she started getting people inviting her to apply for this year. And one of the first ones that asked her and that she applied to was the University of Mississippi in Oxford. And they put out this complete charm offensive that I've not heard of before, which was that I think maybe on a Monday morning they sent an email saying, we've seen the law boards, we encourage you to apply. And so she said, okay. And she turned in her application. I was at a village meeting, and Judy helped her with the first one, say reviewing it, turned it in Monday night. By Tuesday afternoon, they called to say she's accepted the full scholarship for her tuition. And then she got a follow-up call from the dean of the law school, like, encouraging her to say yes to that. The two different professors, one of whom is Michelle Alexander, who wrote the book, Jim Crow, that was the community reading.
Oh my gosh, right.
She teaches faculty at the University of Mississippi. And Charity said in her essay that she was interested in like human rights and civil rights. And so I think that's where the two professors that called her are interested in that.
Wow.
And then they have lined up two different student leaders who called her also. And so finally, by the end of the day, I guess maybe she was talking with one of the professors and said, and they told her, oh yeah, this is great. So you're accepted with a scholarship, please come. And orientation starts tomorrow, Wednesday, and classes will begin on Monday. This is like the third week of August. And she said, well, even if I wanted to come, I don't have a place to live, blah, blah, blah. This professor said, no problem. You'll live with me and my wife. I go to school every day. You can ride with me, campus, and do what you need to do to figure things out, and we'll make sure you get situated. And he was like, oh, okay. And so
turn that down.
really, and so And because he was doing the orientation for the incoming students, he arranged for 2 second-year law students whose classes hadn't started yet to meet her at the Memphis airport. And they had these big signs, it said, welcome charity, they had a big sign from Kenya, their flag from Kenya with a dotted line to the US. I think they thought she was coming directly from Kenya, but instead of and, University of Mississippi School of Law welcomed you, very smart. And then had a third-year student who was around town.
Pardon me. Hi, they're in executive session.
Oh,
Someone else there go, we do.
yeah, yeah. So this third-year student took her around town, took her to the various apartment complexes and stuff like that, so she could begin to look for a place. But it took her like 2 weeks to line that all up. And then the professor sort of planted a bug in one of the students' ears to say, she's going because two suitcases are closed. She's got nothing to move into an apartment. But even though the furnished apartment, this one she found, a lot of students, these students went all out without some help from the faculty and gave her like a surprise housewarming shower. That was everything from a shower curtain, bath mat, to food storage, pants, everything that she would need, which was hard for the wall, bedding, everything. Yeah, so she has really been sort of warmly welcomed there. And these are her first year students that are not supposed to work because the workload is so enormous. And you have to really do well in your first semester because it sort of affects your trajectory through the rest of your studies and career. So they don't want students to work normally, but her prophetic, as soon as I knew she was going to be staying, in fact, I got right out and said, just so you know, Judy and I are for like American family, take good care of her kind of thing. And he wrote back the sweetest, so we're going to do everything to make sure she's successful. I'm sure you will do well on our visit charity, so please plan to stick with us. We have a room, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was this warm with us. So, and we've done some stuff where she has like no money. So we had started some dental work for her year before she left. And they had to call him and say, please get her to a good dentist because she had started a root canal and needed to be finished. I didn't like to be at like a cheap clinic or something. And then we've been back and forth several times. And so he is, he just flew her, he paid for her to fly up here yesterday. Yeah, I'm going to drive her back. It's just a long stop along the way. It's in the key sets along the Silence Trail. So, because she's interested in civil rights, she doesn't know this computer, she got accepted to something in Mississippi, not knowing where Mississippi was, didn't know, didn't even really know the history of segregation in this country. I mean, gosh, from all black country, they didn't know that it had been colonized, that was long gone, just really never experienced what it recognized in this country experience all the time. So it's really interesting for her to be in the South. But I talked to him because he was like, what's your finances? Because her parents are out there. And there's ever going to be a student who could actually work and do the rigors of a first year, she could do it because she was making 23 credits at Cornell and working 12 hours a week. And she's that much of a superstar. And so he got her a job. She's a finance major for this. And so she's doing books for the law department. So, and loves the local influence on the community. Because, of course, the dean is white and everybody else in the office is black. And so she, another professor who takes her to church, and another one who took her to the airport, and, yeah, she's really, but she's the kind of the wonderful young woman who can fly. She doesn't expect it, but she's just rooting for her all the way, So I'm excited. So we were talking from the beginning, today, she was so focused on getting exams done, we hadn't really done much trip planning. So now that she's here, we're talking about, get down there. And,
You take the car or your camper in?
no, I can't prevent this too much hassle, you know. I think we could finance it relatively, you know, expensive hotels at least, and this and that. Because, you know, campgrounds are gonna be out of the way, we sort of want to be in more downtown areas, and, you know,
At this time?
up and out and blah, 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 we just have winterized, de-winterized, we have re-winterized, you know, all that stuff. And I would feel more comfortable just driving my car, because I'm gonna drive that little, because you can't come.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
have to drive all the way back.
Yeah, but there's enough time.
You don't have to run that.
No.
So you take 9 days to go down there?
But, yeah, maybe,
It's not a great trip.
yeah, so we'll stop in Washington and then go to Greensboro, North Carolina, where there are a bunch of conversations where they have a museum there, and Louisiana, and then two other, and I could be, and I told her, I was thinking of, New Orleans. She's like, yeah, let's go to New Orleans. And she said, so can we go to New Orleans after that? No, I said, no, you still got the state of Alabama. I'm already got Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. So we can go down to southern Alabama and then cut over to New Orleans. We have some fun, just relax, and then come back up from southern Mississippi to northern Oxford is in the university in the northern part of the state. Not too far from Memphis, so we'll go and do that. So we'll figure out, we'll find some details, but very excited. No, we were going to spend the whole week just in Washington. And I said,
Nice, great museum.
you know, I've only done it a little bit of touristy, and then the protests, the conferences, but not, you know, but because she's more, I checked the schedule for the Supreme Court, and today is the last day that they were, the justices would be publicly in session, just delivering some decisions, but there's no more arguments in this time period. So
That was
it's
cool.
not, yeah, she would love that, but that's what I heard. So,
Last time I was down in DC this summer, they have Lime bikes now and Lime scooters. So you can get around pretty easily.
oh, okay, yeah, well, she doesn't ride,
She can ride a bicycle.
no, she doesn't drive a car, doesn't ride a bicycle, so.
Oh.
We were teaching her to drive, but then she, the semester started and then that all fell apart, so, I mean, last. So, yeah, so we'll just take things as long as I can drive, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna push it down there either, so. Then it's like, okay, we gotta go in some fun, because it's been like marinating in it is, you know, US racism and barbarous behavior. Americans, it's just not exactly the uplifting trip, but,
I'm trying to think of a relatively new big exhibit. I want to say it's in Alabama, I'm not sure where they put up these,
well, the Lynching Museum,
yeah, with these things, it's like outdoor, and there's these things hanging, with people's names on them. Is that Alabama?
I think it is Alabama. Yeah, I remember hearing about it from a friend.
Not just one of them, you said go to all of those things. It'd be-
Yeah.
I remember I went down to DC, the first time, I was like, I went to Holocaust Museum. And, two full days, I went one day, there's just so much on the second day, so, just worn out. Emotional.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah, that's, I haven't gotten into this with that
That's, yeah.
stuff, so. Yeah, I should, who's got friends in, Silver Spring, so I should see whether or not they've got, they're around, if they've got any room for us, because it'd be nice to visit with them. So just come more to the video stuff, but she was excited, oh, so yeah. So,
Is there an African art museum, do you see?
oh, I'm sure, yeah, and there's a new museum too. I did the Holocaust one. Yeah. And it's also in the Holocaust Museum in so comparing the two is interesting to see how they, managed it. So maybe.
Where are you going?
Well, we're talking about, we have to be here through Saturday, because we finish up our Christmas roast on Saturday. And then, so maybe Monday, maybe as soon as probably. Because we've got friends who are gonna go cut a Christmas tree, and I thought she might like to be part of that, even though we're setting a Christmas tree at our house, but, they go and sort of go, cut your own, or pick your own or something like that, so might do that on Sunday. So Monday would be the soonest that you can. Yeah, we try to look at it. I usually try to look at it
Usually just.
as a walk-in, or if I look at behind me, they're walking out the door.
Yeah, but even though I could change the food, I think we're getting there, it could be 5 minutes.
Yeah, it is. Then we used to have the executive sessions with the, all the birds here. With that, I think the executive session, basically, don't go with it all, don't go with it,
Yeah, it's hard, people don't understand that. Yes, they should have come to the board at a time, talk to them. Email them, have time, not necessarily trying to do this, behind the scenes.
I don't think they would have been true. Yeah, I don't know if they could be, but I mean, I guess, I'm not quite sure why I did that was qualified. The one who was selling the land, the building, I'm not quite sure how that worked, but he said, obviously, a problem for me with transparency.
Yeah.
So, Jamie, how's it going?
Oh, I'm Chris, I'm in.
You're Chris, I was gonna say, yeah, I haven't seen her before, so I was thinking you were Jamie, but yeah, you didn't look like Jamie.
Well, that's a compliment to be 65, 20 years younger than me, so thank you. It's going fine. She's just kind of put me, I mean, I'm not here, I'm like, I'm out here, so I might as well. Yeah, no, I live right over on East Gates Road, and I was going back and forth between here and the, town of Culver, because you're both the first Monday of the month. But, the town of Culver's person, I guess, had just been out for a while, so she hadn't been doing it, and then the last time I was there, she was back, and I'm like, oh, I don't wanna step on your toes, so, all right, I'll just deeper, just try to get some local meeting in the paper.
Yeah, so is the town, I'm also on the town Ulysses board.
Right,
So you guys have.
That, I don't-
Us.
unless somebody else does, because that night does not work for me. And, they just don't have a designated North reporter anymore.
Yeah.
And Jamie's really doing, I mean, we have a sports guy, and he's kind of the east and all the sports. But there used to be a person
Right, I know.
specifically for North, and now there's not.
Yeah, it was nice because, when it was the other Jamie, Swinnerton, she, could get to know the community.
Yeah.
She was, and really covered stuff well for us, but,
Yeah.
yeah, but I was looking for some contact information. Give a call, and it looks like she has like 3 jobs.
She really does. She really does quite very, and really the south is her, that's kind of key, but she's trying to get done. So, when, if I'm available, I can certainly come and cover ended up, one thing I find though is the last one I was at, I think it was in a couple of months since I've been here. Nothing happens terribly quickly, all the things on the agenda were pretty much the same thing. So I try to find something to be of interest and critical. But it's important, I think it's important to the community to know what's going on.
I formerly met you on the corner.
Oh, yes, I only know you, I have seen you here before, and, I mostly know of you through the zoners, who are my daughter's best friends, so you're the Annie I've heard of for years and years.
Yeah, great family,
Yes, they are,
great kids.
yeah, they really are very big.
I realize I said it was from the work that Nancy Saylor.
Yes, we met the last time,
Okay.
well, the first time I think I covered this.
Okay, that's why I used to see familiar.
Yes, and in fact, I got the two of you confused. The last time I was here, you came in and I wrote down that you were Nancy, and then as you were going on, I was like, wait a second, this is not Nancy. Like, I realized who you were, so I was talking to you, Karen.
The triplets, Violet and Alex, helped me and my partner do the library, not the annual library dinner, but they have somebody do like a quiz, a literary quiz, so those two girls helped us do that.
That's awesome. Aw. Yeah, my daughter and Alex, have been very good friends since kindergarten.
What's your daughter's name?
Lily.
Oh, Lily, yeah.
And, it's funny because when they were all babies, we had a mutual friend who lived in the Eco Village. And there were a couple of years when we all trick or treated together in the Eco Village when they were baby babies, you know? And then, you know, fast forward, 2 or 3 years later, and Alex and Lily were in the same, kindergarten class. And so I always like to whip out the pictures of them in there. And I remember at the time, because I didn't know Kathleen or Kathy, we just knew each other through trick-or-treating this mutual friend. And so Alex, Mason, Violet as babies, when I was like, okay, Mason's a boy, Violet's a girl, I had no idea what Alex was, you know? And then she ended up being my best friend, so.
I remember Lily and Alex were really quiet when they were younger. They've come out of their shell a lot.
Yes,
They're both really shy.
Yeah. They're very similar, but and that's why I get such a kick with Violet's, because Violet is such the mom.
I'm gonna organize everything.
I know.
Hold on, I have a plan.
Exactly, I love it.
When they were really little, they used to come over every Monday after school, for years.
Right.
And, so we had them after school. One time, I picked them up at school, and they were really excited because they got to order a book, that you get to keep, so they were all excited because they came. And Mason had a comic book. Alex had a book about horses. She had an organizer.
Did you tell her this?
I don't know, she was really young, and she tried, so it was, a little bit smaller than this, and she's like, okay, what's your name and what's your phone number? And she's trying to write it in, but, she's got those little kids' hands, and the writing was so big, she couldn't write small, and she kept erasing it, because it couldn't fit in the little lines there, and my phone, big, and she was so frustrated. And she didn't know why she needed this. But she just needed it. That was the first thing she learned. Organize.
That's great, I can't wait to tell them that story. That's fantastic.
Not that she called anybody or wrote to anybody, but just.
You didn't have the information.
That's good.
No.
I did not laugh, I don't think. No, You do your stuff in there, you just don't have to pay them.
Yeah, we can.
I'll do that,
Yeah,
so that's probably takes some longer. Just that little bit.
Yeah, they've got. How many minutes, guys,
Oh.
there?
Yeah. Should have left us pizza instead. Was it just the end of the year? Yeah, it's two different times this month, 2 and 11.
Couple more.
We tried, I promise, we tried to go back. Jeez.
I'm sorry, but I'm talking.
I can't mumble with these mics anymore.
I apologize.
That's
I can't,
right.
I can't mumble to myself with these mics anymore. I just realized. I gotta,
You know, I
Joe?
was doing like a sound check to check, see how it recorded the YouTube video.
and your soundtrack is.
And I was just like, wow, like I have a lot of like transition noises as I'm like looking at my notes. And like,
Oh, yeah, yeah, the paper.
it's just,
paper picks up.
it's just not talk if I'm not talking.
All right.
So I move that we come out of executive session.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are out of executive session. Hope everyone enjoyed the cookies.
A lot of butter.
Lots of butter.
Quite good.
It's the holidays. It's about butter.
Item number 4 on the agenda is our approval of minutes from the November 14th meeting, which are in the Dropbox, if we haven't had a chance to look at them.
They look good to me. I'd move that we approve the minutes as presented from November 14th.
Did you get those handouts?
Motion, do we have a second?
BJ, did you get those? Okay.
Second.
Any discussion on the draft minutes from November 14th?
They look good to me.
If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. All right, item number 5 is our first public comment period. Privilege of the floor. If there's anyone in the audience from the public who would like to make any comments, now's your chance.
Ellen, you have 15 minutes. Someone's got to do it.
Going once? All right, and hearing no desire for public comment, we will jump
Back.
straight to any comments or reports from our representatives. Whichever of the two of you would like to go first.
Thank you. The county passed a couple of resolutions supporting various things. One was, supporting the state law that is going through, some committees legalizing marijuana for recreational use for people 21 years or older. And we passed a resolution opposing the Cave power plant. They want to change over instead of coal to use natural gas, so we had a resolution against that. We had about 100 people come out in the community, all but one was against, was for the resolution, so against the power plant repowering. we passed a municipal housing affordability grant program. Have you guys, did we talk about that before?
You mentioned it last month, yeah.
So that got passed, and so that's, you can apply, each municipality can apply for up to $10,000 to help with improving affordable housing in your area, in your municipality. And they're pretty, this is the first year, it's a trial, and so we'll see if people are using it. Some type of things might be you hire a consultant, you know, or something. And I believe you have to use the money within like 6 to 9 months, so it's a short-term thing. It's not for building, it's for, you know, other things like that. And also passed a program so that you can apply, I mentioned this before, you can apply for up to $5,000 for park and trail improvements in your municipality. And through,
How would we get more information about that one?
I would say for both of those, you know, Keith should be getting more information from TCOG, and I asked our county planning department to contact municipalities directly about how to apply for that. So they're going to come, send you an email and tell you the application. They're trying to set up an online application, so it's easier.
Any idea if footbridge would count as a trail?
I like that, they try to make it kind of vague.
Vague, no?
I'd say talk to you. I would support it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
put a little bit of support for you, I used to live over that way, I use that trail bridge.
Yeah, it's a great bridge.
And is it gonna be competitive, or will each community sort of entitled to a little bit depending on what it wants to do?
No, it's gonna be competitive, so there's only a certain amount. And I think, let's see, I believe, for instance, for the trails, park and trails, it's 50,000, and there's, I think, 16 municipalities. So, behoove you to, you know, again, we'll get, you know, they should be getting the information, and then, you know, you might want to think about it before, you know. I'll try and look online, see if they have it yet, or have any information I can send to you with the town, make sure you get in on that. I mean, the county's purchasing a bunch of electric cars. We're trying to move to all new vehicles if we can to be electric. There's a plastic bag ban going through our committees, and the administration is looking into that. So that will probably be in about 6 or 7 months. And during that process, we're going to reach out more to municipalities and businesses and different things to see how folks feel about that, how it could, you know, affect people. We want to make sure too that individuals or stores that would be most affected in some way, either get grant money or figure out some way to help them, especially individuals that might, you know, need reusable bags, to be able to have those. And then there probably would be a fee on paper bags. The local assessment board meetings, do you guys know about that? It's usually held in the town hall once a year. Our assessment has a local meeting where you can go and appeal, contest your assessment for your property. We haven't had a lot of people come to those over the years, so we're trying for a year of not, so 2019 of not having those meetings anymore. So you can certainly go down, you know, to the assessment office or call them up. Sometimes they fund people's houses if they're homebound and help them out. So we're gonna try it this year because it was a lot of person power to do that for a couple of hours, just sitting there, and maybe one person would show up. And that's about it.
Any questions for Ann? Thank you.
And I'll miss next meeting, I'll be out of town in January.
Congratulations, Betsy.
All right. Nancy?
Yeah, I don't know if people have been following the Michigan Journal, but they just reported that we got a $3 million course, it was $300,000 on $1 million project. And so we're trying to figure out whether what we really need is probably a second, an aerator in that tank, in Jacksonville. But that may be too small a project for that money. So, but like on a Saturday morning, I opened the paper and it said $3 million. So, do that correction. But then apparently we also got $1 million grant to help replace the bridge on Cemetery Road. But that was sort of submitted without us knowing a lot of details, so we're hoping to learn more about that tomorrow. And, but that, we know that that bridge is in need of repair, so hopefully one way or another, we'll know more details soon. As I alluded to at the beginning, we are interested in continuing our relationship with you for the snow removal on that stretch of the Newtown sidewalk from the fairground to Schursay. And I know that your DPW's already been clearing that. We've seen them out there taking care of it. We're grateful for the good job they do. And we're also grateful for the DPW efforts at helping us clean up our lane off Sable Drive. And we've also had some very helpful input from Tom Myers because we are looking at trying to put a small off-road parking area at the very sort of entrance to that hiking or that natural area, just to be able to make sure that we don't clog Sable Drive for the residents. So we've been doing some measuring and trying to determine, we want to make sure that we're good neighbors and we follow the rules, and we've been consulting with Tom. It seems like a project of that size, since it's nowhere near the creek, that it should be able to proceed as if basically putting a driveway in. But at this point, because it's taken us till now to get there, we might well start to do it. Our town highway, who were providing some materials, then volunteers will hopefully have their own tractor to spread it around. Highway department doesn't do that. And we've been talking to Youth Addiction Recovery Service, CARS, about their expansion of putting a second facility on the land that they own on 227. And we may, as we talk more with them, we may circle back around to talk with Dad and Dusty about the water line that goes out there. But we're taking a step at a time there. And I know Ricky helped organize us to look at the reconciliation of expenses for the summer recreation program, and there was fairly significant overage compared to what was budgeted. And so we had agreed that a joint approach would be to take half of that, roughly $8,000, out of a reserve that we built from the year when we were under budget, and then the other half would be split between the town and the village. So that might be an item.
Yeah, that'll be part of my report later.
Yeah, so, but I just wanted to let you know that it is on our town agenda for tomorrow night, for our 22. So, we didn't pick up on that, so we're planning to do our share. And what we've got on our agenda for tomorrow night is mostly year-end, I mean, some zoning, continued zoning discussion, but mostly it's internal stuff. We got some personnel policy and year-end kinds of things. So that's what we're up to.
Questions for Nancy? All right, thanks, Nancy. Item number 7 on the agenda is reports from board members. Ben Darfler.
Sure, so I'll start with the comprehensive plan and zoning revision committee. We have our next meeting this Thursday in this room. I believe so. I haven't actually heard a confirmation yet from the chair, but that's when our standard meeting time is. And we are in talks with EDR to have a kind of meet and greet with them to understand, just to get a little better sense of who they are, how they operate, if it would make a good partnership for them to work with us on revising our comprehensive plan and then further our zoning. So that will be in January on the 10th. That we'll try and set that up, assuming that we can get enough folks from the committee to make that. So that's kind of the update on that. Not much else since our last meeting was after our previous planning revision meeting. On the fire side of things, I've got an email from Jason with a couple of details to walk through. So we've got a number of things that have been up for auction, trying to kind of clear things out. There was a number of SCBA respirators that were up for auction. The auction closed and it was only up to $770. Jason would like to counter with $2,000. He believes that he can sell them each off for about 100 to 125 a piece at a used SCBA dealer, which I think would get him back up to around that 2,000 mark. So I don't know if we need to give a formal like resolution or just kind of a sounds good, but
I don't think we do.
yeah, his intent.
We declared them no use, right? I mean, we're done with them.
Right, so we don't really need a resolution for it, but we're essentially not accepting the price that he received.
Yeah, we're gonna not accept, and he has the option to counter, and he would like to counter with $2,000. And if they don't accept that counter, he'll just go talk to a reseller that he's familiar with.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. The Tahoe closed at 13,200. He was hoping for 15. So he's suggesting that he counters with 14,1, and if not, if they don't take that, still sell it to them at 13,2. That would be his approach there. He said he could list it elsewhere, but he'd have to give a percentage to the seller and probably still net about the same amount. So yeah, I can give him feedback that both of those sound reasonable options to us.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the Tahoe to make.
I don't either, and I kind of trust him on this. There was some damage done to the truck with the Kubota. They were pulling in to get gas at the school and kind of took the corner too tight. So there's some damage to that he's talked with the insurance company. It's just under 3,200, but he'll be working on getting that fixed up. And then the let's see, the truck and the pickup truck and the trailer, kind of they took the corner too tight and they hit. So it sounds like it's the trailer and the bumper on the truck and on the trailer kind of damage in there. And the passenger side of the box on the truck is what he said. And then the new truck will be here by the end of the month, or the first part of the year. So in the next month or so. Jason would like to get permission to get the current truck listed for sale. He's looking for an asking price of $45,000 to $50,000.
Thought we did that.
So that's the top. So this is not the Tahoe,
This is the pumper.
This is the mini pumper, the old mini pumper. Now that we've got the new one coming in, and that one's been refurbished at one point, right? I can't quite remember the history of that truck.
That was the old chassis and new body. And
That's
then
right.
it's like
That's what I assume remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if we need anything formal again for him to have permission to sell. If we have to do another.
Yeah, we have to declare it of no further use
Okay.
as of a date. We have to establish a date, so we don't know exactly when the new truck will be here.
No. I'm hesitant to guess. I mean, I could, he said end of the month or first part of the year. That seems vague to me. I could go end of January, but I'm still a little bit unsure.
I mean, it sounds like we'll have another meeting between now.
That's a good
and-
point. So maybe we'll just push it until,
Yeah, just wait.
Yeah, except he's
January.
gonna wanna try to list it to sell over the new year.
If we list it early, that means we can't use it after that date, is that correct?
He can list it once we've declared it of no further use, even if it's before the no further use date.
Right. But if we were to say there's no further use of tomorrow, then we couldn't continue using it in operation, right? So we want to err on this later side.
And we couldn't declare it of no further use as of the end of the month of January.
It's kind
So
of what
that
I'm
he can
thinking.
list it, and then if it's ready before then we would have to move that date up next month. Would be one way to do it.
That seems
Yeah.
reasonable. So just having it listed, do you think is enough to, or declared of no further use, he can list it?
He can
sort
list
of
it, and then he
as
just has to
of-
make it available at, on a particular date.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
All right. Yeah, so I'll have a motion to list the mini pumper as of no further use as of the end of January 2019.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
All right. I'll let Jason know about that. That is all I have for fire and comp plan zoning revision.
All right. Any questions for Ben? All right, EMS and youth, Ben Carver.
So I have sort of sad news on the youth side of things. Duran Van Doren, our chair for many years, resigned. He was the chair of the youth commission. He was the youth commissioner. He had a belt. It was a very sweet. I mean, I assume everyone here knows Duran, so you can sort of imagine we had a little ceremony and he passed the belt, and it was great. But I hadn't realized he's been here the whole time that I've been here, so I knew it was some time, but he said he'd been on the commission for about 18 years, 17 or 18 years. He was the commissioner for almost a decade, or was it a full decade? It was quite some time. So it's really, it's sad. I hope that we can do something for him in the way of a thank you. But for right now, I hope it suffices that if he should see this, we thank him very much. It was great to have him. He was a great help, I think, to youth in Ulysses and the village. It's sad to see him go. We did, as Nancy mentioned, also have a reconciliation meeting. Thanks, by the way, for coming to that. And as she also mentioned, we were under by a little bit over 8,000. I think it was actually closer to 9, although part of that is a guess about busing billing that we have we gotten that bill yet? The bus bill is always slow and always sort of leaves us in a spot where we're guessing what the school is going to charge. But we discussed splitting basically. So we've created this reserve that I like to mention Norton hates. But we have a reserve for cases like this. So a couple years ago, we brought in more than we spent. So we put some of that aside in order to sort of help in years like this. So we had discussed contributing from that reserve account $2,200 to meet with our combined money from the town and the village. We'd get about half of that back. So I'm assuming that works. That's again, when we actually do that, I suppose we'll need to do a referendum. But how did we do that? Because that was a reserve account that was created with a specific purpose.
We still wait 30 days.
We still have to do that.
But it's within our budget year that we have to cover it. So we can do it at the January meeting
Right.
when hopefully that bill is committed, we know the exact. That's what I would suggest you do.
Yeah, no, that works. So then I also had a meeting with the Four Boards group, which is the school. Liz Thomas from the town. Actually, the school wasn't there. Pat Masters was there, but the school, I don't know, there was some difficulty with Tara's email getting out or something. And the T-Bird Community Rec, that was another fairly productive meeting. I feel like the group has some momentum that's going. Tara did ask again that everyone sign up for her listserv. I think that's a big important thing for them, just to sort of build presence in the community. So if you would go to tbirdrec.org. Ben, you would,
tbirdcr.org.
who designed that? You did design
Not,
that,
not,
right?
no, it's-
Oh, gee. Oh,
It
well,
was
that's a
someone else.
terrible joke then. I thought you designed
It was gonna be weird.
it. Anyway, so if we could all go and sign up for that, that would be great. Then, so the tree committee is later on the agenda, and we have another meeting coming up. But at this point, we're just working on creating a tree ordinance. That is the main sort of thrust. I've sort of given the rundown on what that committee's about, so I won't go further. But if anyone has thoughts about sort of the direction or the importance of trees in the village, I would love to hear them and integrate that into the tree ordinance in whatever way is practical. So that's all I got.
All right, any questions or comments for Ben?
Can I ask a question? Is the goal to then get to or is it maybe it's still being discussed, to get to the tree city designation?
So that's like a means to an end. That's the first goal. That's kind of, that will then allow us points when we apply for grant funding and that kind of thing. The biggest goal is to have a tree inventory so that we as a board can make sort of bigger strategic decisions about how to deal with trees in the village generally, and go from there.
Yeah, the town is doing similar tree ordinance, trying to be a tree community too,
Right.
so that we can do something together.
Right. Well, in the grant, right, and the grant that was written, Don wrote with the town. I mean, so we're really piggybacking on town efforts in a big way on that, especially the grant that would then help pay for the inventory.
Okay. Deb Watkins is out of town, as I mentioned earlier. Keith, Police, TCOG, and TACC.
Start with police, and we'll start with the part that will allow Chief Nelson to depart. Assuming he's staying here, not for the cookies. But I could be wrong. Won't put words in your mouth, Joe.
It could be for the
So I believe 2 months ago, we approved the idea of having 2 full-time officers on the village police department. And at this point, we are ready to hire 2 people, or vote to hire 2 people who have been brought forward by Chief Nelson. 2 people that the board have seen. It is Mackenzie Covert and Ben Wright. We've seen their resumes. I think they have very good resumes. They are both local and would be great community police officers. I don't know, Joe, do you want to speak to these officers, or do you just want us to move along?
Well, I have nothing to add than what I've already added. Well, and I guess since I mentioned it, is for the community that doesn't know, Officer Colbert, she comes with 17 years of experience from the town of our village of Dryden, multiple trainings, multiple skills. And Officer Ben Wright, deputy for Schuyler County, currently a school resource officer, started his career here in this community, and he's excited to come back and serve this community. So we have a 17-year veteran and a 4-year veteran. And her experiences, and that she moves on later in her career, and Ben moves on his career, I think the village would benefit from both young and experienced to benefit the community and safety and other integration of, not a negative way, but the police into the community and interaction, and how they have the love of the community and safety paramount and concern for the community as it grows.
So I would make a motion that we move to hire Mackenzie Covert at a rate of $24.75 an hour and Ben Wright at a rate of $23 an hour,
Effective.
effective January 1st,
No, January, the week of, since our pay period, January 7th.
January
First pay
7th.
week of, yeah.
effective January 7th, 2019.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So I'd just like to point out briefly that I was opposed to the initial posting of these two positions. I think that there are steps that we could have and maybe should have taken to mitigate the budget implications. That said, I think these two candidates are really exemplary, and as much as I would like to just sort of hold out and be a stick in the mud and vote no on principle, they're really great. We're really lucky that they're here and part of this community already, and that they were sort of drawn back into the fold. So that's it.
The implication for the part-timers that have been housed in police in Oklahoma.
If I may, we have lost, in the past 4 full-time police officers. So as we move forward with putting in full-time, we lost 4 part-timers. They went on full-time jobs elsewhere. So the requirement is down, but however, with the part-timers we have, they already know that they're still gonna be there. We're still gonna need the 10 that we have to fill in for vacation, 1 or 2 days a month as a currently. So there is no immediate effect to the part-timers. Just they maybe cut a few hours in their availability, but they still have their positions. Where it goes is to future candidates and cadets. I still would like to have the training program, but with anticipation of the young police officers moving on to other departments and occasionally filling in part-time here.
I think what it does, Nancy, is it saves us from having to try to scramble and backfill.
I just didn't know if
Yeah.
I assumed it wasn't enough to fully
Oh, no.
staff, so I didn't know whether you were adding 2 more or losing some and replacing others. Sounds like you're-
It works out well to benefit all the parties involved. As we have lost 4 to other departments, we don't have to worry about concern about filling those. And as we move forward with the set schedules for the full-timers, there's only a couple days and other shifts that we're gonna fill in. And again, it alternates in every couple of days between them. We'll have a good coverage for the community.
Any additional comments or questions? All right, then hearing none, all in favor of hiring Mackenzie Covert and Ben Wright at the stated rates effective January 7th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations and thank you, Chief. And thank Mackenzie and Ben for us, please.
I appreciate the board and I appreciate thank you very much.
Thanks. You.
Moving on with more police discussion. Speaking of Nancy, we will continue our memorandum of understanding with the town of Ulysses. No changes there, so that will renew in 2019. Another thing I discussed with Joe, which I thought I'd bring up with the board for the sake of any discussion you want to have, is the idea of signage on our main street that would encourage drivers to watch their speeds. As we've discussed, I think in the past, there's only so much we can do with Route 96, but certainly there is the mini village across from Gimme, where there's a lot of children and a lot of parked cars where children, firsthand have a tendency to dart sometimes from the sidewalk. And I know a lot of people, well, not a lot, that might be drastic, but many people have spoken to me about just kind of the speeds through there. We have large trucks coming through there. And so we talked about children at play signs or speed strictly enforced signs that are within our right to put up without amending any laws, from what I'm led to believe. I don't know. yet. I emailed Dusty to see if we have an inventory of these signs or they would need to be created. But I think it's worth considering. And I'd be interested in kind of any opinions the board has on that.
I'm game for any traffic device that will slow people down on Main Street. Like, absolutely. Yeah, we tried to lower the speed limit. It just, the state gets all defensive about their roads.
Right.
But I'm absolutely in favor of it. I agree with all those who have voiced concerns about it.
Do we know how expensive those signs is that like have a speed radar or whatever built into them, right? There's often up by the school where it blinks at you and yells at you. Like, I find those rather effective. I mean, personally, just driving.
There is some degree where you want to like have the aesthetic impact be somewhat minimal though, and those are pretty
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Joe mentioned that if we went with something like the speed strictly enforced sign, then all residents and guests would both have to be understand that, that's assigned to the police officers to enforce that area. And so whether they've lived here 30 years or you're a tourist, everyone's going to kind of be held accountable there. So we could go either way. I don't know if anyone has a preference for what kind of signage we pursue or look into. Not necessarily looking for any approval here tonight. I don't know what kind of approval that actually requires.
I think DOT will have an opinion about what we can put up and where, so that's probably a good place to start.
Okay.
Have Dusty reach out to, forget his name, reach out to Zone 3 and find out what they'll let us do.
the Chief Reddy signs. What did you call those?
The pedestrian buddies?
Pedestrian buddies. I mean, I thought those were effective. I mean, they were noticeably effective. We didn't do a traffic study to determine,
I think they helped. I mean, I think everything helps.
Right.
Can't put them out in the winter because plows destroy them, but it seems like anything we can do to make a difference around the margins will help, would be a good thing.
Okay, well, we'll look into it. Next step. Yeah. Lastly, with police monthly report, 224 calls for service in the month of November, which is higher than usual. 15 of them were of a criminal investigation nature, and then 90, the rest were not. We did have 2 overdoses, which is always something we kind of keep an eye on. So try to continue to make sure that's not a growing statistic, or at least keep better track of these. And as I mentioned, I think last meeting, before the end of the year, I will be turning these monthly reports into a dashboard that we will share publicly, both a monthly report and also kind of quarterly statistics for comparisons. And I think that's it for police. Keep going.
Sure.
Next would be the report from the Chamber of Commerce. Winterfest is complete. As far as I know, it went off without any major problems. Sundries was awarded the best decorated storefront. I was asked to judge that, so I strolled Main Street on Friday night trying to look regular. So Sundries won. They did a very nice job with their decoration. I'm also happy to announce that the chamber elected me to their board. So I guess the only thing that changes there, I've been to every meeting since April. The only thing that changes there is I guess now I have voting powers. So that's fun. Alan, at the annual chamber dinner, we had some awards handed out. Alan Vogel was awarded as Person of the Year. Little Venice won Business of the Year, and T-Burg Rotary won Organization of the Year. Maybe the most important thing to remind everyone is that letters to Santa are active now. So get your letters into the Trumansburg Fire Department as soon as possible. The mailbox is out there, direct service to the North Pole. I will be, this will lead into the TCOG discussion. One thing I'll be bringing up just to hear feedback from the chamber at the next meeting is what Ann mentioned, the plastic bag ban. We were encouraged by, TCOG was encouraged by the county administrator to kind of get that discussion going amongst local municipalities to get different feedback from those that may be impacted. So going into TCOG, we will discuss streetlights later, but that's been a major discussion at TCOG. EMS studies are continuing. EMS costs, as we all know, are high and getting higher. So we're continuing to look at, is there any kind of mutual cost savings in the future that could be considered? On the side, I had a meeting with the former county administrator, Joe Mariana, to kind of discuss his opinions for perhaps finding some initiatives to get going in TCOG. As I mentioned before, attendance, I think, is rather low. There seem to be some folks that think that the meetings aren't as productive as they used to be. The organization isn't as productive as it used to be. So I'm trying to find maybe some topics to introduce there to kind of make it productive again. And I think the LEDs have a lot of potential there to be something we can all rally around. Moving on to safe spots. So we have approved guidelines. We have collateral coming in. So as I mentioned, all participating locations wanted some sort of guidelines for how to maintain their safe spot. And so I created that and got approval from various agencies. Ben actually did some follow-up as well. So I think that's all ready to go. I created some, this is an example of, this will be much smaller, but this is essentially this will be a two-sider that will be handed out to all the participating locations, this being the front and this being the back. So in addition to the guidelines, there's also a more picture-friendly way to approach people for easy reference. We also picked up another participant, Little Venice, joined us. So they're on the more updated version of that. So that gives us, I think, a pretty good number of participating locations. The school district was very helpful. BJ Nelson was very helpful in getting more collateral. So we'll include this in the total packet that every participant will get, so that as much as we want our participants to be helpful, they are not professionals. So we have lots of materials for them to hand out to anybody that may utilize the safe spot so that they can, I don't know if anybody wants to see these. It's in the Dropbox too. Anyone here is welcome to look at this. So that's all ready to go. I'll be printing the actual bigger, so this logo here will be blown up, maybe 18 inches by 18 inches to be put in the storefront windows. And I expect to do all this, deliver this packet to everyone within the next couple weeks. So great. And I've actually was invited by the school to come in and kind of talk. This came up in my parent-teacher conference, and the second grade teacher, I don't want to say her name in case she wants to remain anonymous, was very excited about this and thought maybe coming in to talk about it would be a good idea. And so this is actually something, a lot of this, this is something that will also be shared with the school district and other places to kind of market it and get people knowing that it's happening. And we'll put out other press about that as well. I think that's it. And we're going to go from that to Vicky to discuss online bill pay. So let that transition happen and we'll talk more about that.
All right, any questions for Keith?
Congratulations on Safe Spot. That's been a long time.
It's been,
Looks like it's
finally,
really-
we're only 3 months behind. I guess by government standards, that's early. So wanted to get going the first week of the school season. It's in a good place.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Just on the safe spot, that it is a great initiative that is spearheaded. Will there be any way that the vendors or the locations will report back to somebody about whether they have someone who comes in and needs help?
Yeah, that is what has kind of been laid out in like the chamber meetings is we hope you'll kind of keep track if people come in and use it. That will be,
Report back to you, or-
yeah, I mean, ideally, but if they want to report back to, I mean, I think all of these businesses are represented within the chamber, so they can report back to the chamber or they can report back to me. We're trying to make this look like a joint partnership between the village and the chamber. So I'm open to that, but they'll be contacting somebody for sure, and I'll be able to report back on how often it's being used. So I certainly want to know how often people are coming and using it. I don't know if we want to send people that use it a follow-up survey or anything like that, but I would like at least the participants know. I don't know. I'd at least want the participants to kind of give their feedback on how they feel it's going. So for sure, yeah.
All right, Treasurer Mickey.
I have just a couple things. One is we had tabled the Fisher supplemental agreement number 2 because it looked the same to all of us. So I did call and I talked to Rhonda, and she described this as an additional season of inspection because of the second portion of the sidewalk on South Street. So that's what this is. It's just a recap of the inspections and, oop, here you go. And that the second portion of it.
Right, so part of Fisher's contract was for site inspection services. So this is, as Vicky said, this is a summary of all of the site inspection services that they provided for the South Street section of the sidewalk build down to Tamarack. So it looked somewhat redundant, but wasn't. So I would entertain a motion to authorize me to sign the supplemental agreement number 2 from Fisher for the now completed Safe Routes to School sidewalk project.
So moved.
All right, motion, we have a second.
Second.
So I am still somewhat confused. So this is something they've already done, presumably? I mean, they're gone, right?
Right, so because this is the closeout contract, the closeout document, because that section of sidewalk wasn't in the original project scope, and we added it on later, this is the closeout of, even though it's all part of the same project, they're treating it almost like a second piece.
But there's no financial obligations that are in there. I mean, we've
Very
closed,
good.
we've.
We have one more invoice to come from them,
Right, but
very,
we're-
very small one.
Right, but we're-
Yes, we already paid them.
So I don't know what would happen if I didn't sign it.
Yeah,
but-
it
Is
seems.
this more like signing acknowledgement that we received this?
No, I think it probably could or should have been signed prior to
That's,
starting construction.
that's what it looks like to me. It looks like, I don't know. I
But
mean,
we
I read
didn't-
it.
We didn't even
a
get
month and
it
a
till
half
like
ago.
mid-October.
But I'm fine. It's
But it's a review of everything that was in the second part of it.
done.
Looking for my page. Any other comments or questions on this piece? All right, hearing none, then all in favor of authorizing me to sign this addendum with Fisher, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions.
Yes. Sorry. I wasn't paying attention.
No, it's fine.
Going on to,
What's next?
next, do you want to do municipal pay next?
I'd love to do municipal next.
Okay, so, Keith spoke with, Sherry again,
Stacy,
Stacy.
For the
Sorry,
record.
always
It's okay.
Sherry. And there was a very, very, very simple form that we needed to complete. And, Gordon will ask you to, for your approval to sign it. There are 6 things that I need to get together, things like voided check, logo, the list of departments we want, what we want payment in each of those departments, a list of users who will access the payment. I'm thinking it would be you and I and Tammy. Okay? And then the mayor's first and last name and an email address.
So this actually doesn't require my signature. This is the form which is going to authorize Municipay to create the application.
Right.
So we would need to authorize them to do that. And then we'll need to authorize me to sign the actual application once we have it.
It's important that you
So
apply for
that-
your application.
Oh, I understood that you had to sign the bottom there.
First and last name, the person signing the agreement. But this is to prepare the application.
Oh, okay, I guess I assumed that you had to sign
You can
it.
double check, I'll sign underneath. So I would entertain a motion that we move forward with utilizing Municipay as a online point of billing. Online point of payment for residents to pay their village bills electronically.
I would definitely move that.
Second.
On behalf of everyone in your house. We have a motion in a second. Any
And hopefully
discussion?
other houses.
Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. So I'm just going to scan this,
We
And
pick and choose. what we-
send all the information to, Stacy.
Okay.
And do you want to be CC'd on that?
Sure.
Okay,
Love a good CC.
okay.
Rorden, do we need to approve then your ability to sign the actual application?
If we want to sign it before our next meeting, then yes.
I would make that motion because I was hoping that we would have this out there by the new year. So,
Have a motion to allow me to authorize me to sign the application once it is available from Municipay.
Second, with just the caveat that we're authorizing, not like asking you to, so if the application is bizarre for any reason, obviously, hold back, but I assume that goes without saying.
It's good to say. I was gonna say something to that effect. So yes.
All right, we have a motion in a second. Any additional
That's
discussion?
weird.
Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Opposed, abstentions? And next.
And my last thing is to please decide on a cleaning company. In the Dropbox,
You were supposed to find us lower estimates.
I did. I did.
She actually did.
The Griffith
it
one,
is-
was that?
Yes, the Griffith one. Her name's Amy Grant. That's another whole other person. Who cleans too, but does not have insurance. Yes, Miss Griffin came back with a lower bid of $400 a month. The only thing is she asked that in the first couple of weeks, it would be $450 because we've had a lack of, and it's gonna take a little longer.
The deep
first-
clean.
The deep clean, yes,
Seems entirely
yes.
reasonable.
But she did lower it by $100 a month. She seems, but we desperately need somebody. And I can't get anybody to respond to me.
Well, that's, I mean, 400 is close. It was, what, 375?
380.
380, so.
And we have proof of insurance.
I will get it for her. I told her she had to have it before she started. And she does have it. I would just need a copy of it.
I mean, I move we accept the contract with, is the name of the company just Griffith Cleaning?
Mhm.
With Griffith Cleaning for
Yes.
the stated $400 a month. the exception of the first couple months, pending her providing proof of insurance.
Good, we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Good work. Thanks, Vicky.
Can't write that fast. Insurance. Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Oh,
of ex-
Do you need to say effective, are we gonna go effective January 1st or?
Effective pending her providing her proof of insurance.
Okay, so when she does that, if she does it this week, she can start next week?
Schedule
That
herself.
suits me.
Yay, okay.
Right, then all in favor of accepting this, quote for cleaning, as approved, please say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions.
Thank you so much. Other than that, it's just been a whirlwind, so, hey, everything's good. The house is, oh, we're dealing with the heat thing. You know that?
Yeah.
We're,
I'm-
we're trying. It's- the
We're
toes are-
working on it.
The toes are very cold in the morning.
I've now been sent a link for a heat warming mat that you might consider purchase. No, they're working.
I
they're
just
working
think it's
on it.
adjustments. I
They're
really
working
do.
on it. They're working on it. Yeah,
Yeah, he put little sensors in the office
that's right.
and he ordered us something that he's, like a thermostat that he's gonna put on the opposite wall.
Yeah.
So it'll really go with that.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I'll just mention more broadly to people. So we've got the air source heat pumps
Right.
in the clerk's office and the code enforcement office. And we're working through just making sure that they're kind of keyed in exactly right. There's some cooler spots and warmer spots. They've got some sensors in different areas to get a better sense of exactly what's going on. And then they'll kind of figure out how to best approach it. So one approach is with the next round of air source heat pumps that they're going to put in, there'll be an additional kind of control center, whatever, and that'll allow the units to take a temperature reading like at your desk versus at the unit itself. So that might help with some of that, but it also might be better. We might want to look into like a fan just to kind of circulate the air better so that there's less kind of warm spots over here and cold spots over there, whatever it might be. So they're kind of looking into it.
The only issue we had over the weekend, and we think it is contributing, is our fire alarm kept going off. Like it would beep for like 5 seconds and then it would, like when our lights go off, it goes on, that kind of thing. I think it's because it's cold in the hallway. I think it has something to do with that because as soon as I opened the doors and about 45 minutes later, it stopped doing it. And it did it all week because Amy worked and she was telling me that it did it on and off all weekend. And I called Doyle and Doyle's like, well, we don't show anything. We could call, I kind of hesitated yet to call the company that actually comes and fixes them until we figure out this heat thing.
Okay.
So I don't know what we're gonna do out there.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
But I did explain that to Snook. What's his name?
John?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's, sorry, I'm done.
The only other thing Vicky did have mentioned to me is that she would like the board to authorize me to sign fire and EMS contracts as they trickle in from from the towns. We have one already. Someone's trying to get the early bird award.
Yeah, I'd make that motion. That's nice if we can have that go smoothly.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to be clear for the public, these are contracts that we've already worked out and established. It's just a matter of having the paperwork signed.
So all in favor of allowing me to sign contracts with either or all of the towns of Covert, Hector, and Ulysses for fire and EMS protection, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
But just also add that MEC has their own.
Those are the ones that are all signed.
Oh, those are done.
Yeah. All right, our clerk is excused for the evening, which takes us to the mayor's report. First item is our newly formed Street Tree Advisory Committee. Doesn't officially have members yet. And so I am going to appoint after some discussion with Ben Carver, the following people to this ad hoc committee so they can continue the work they've already begun. I'm appointing Ben Carver as the chair of the committee, Don Ellis, Karen Powers, Michael Ulberg, and Nita Glenn. And I greatly appreciate their willingness to volunteer. Second item I have is due to the unexpected resignation of Brian Snyder as our EMS manager back in August, we have been managing the department essentially from my office, which means delegating a lot of responsibilities to people who work in the department. And a lot of things trickle back up the food chain to me, which I think would be better managed and better handled, obviously by an administrator, if and when we do find that person. But until such time, and because I don't want to rush to find an administrator simply to fill the role and run the risk of compromising on who we would want in that position, I would like this board to, by resolution, form it's still an ad hoc committee, but by resolution, form an EMS management committee, which would consist of myself, Ben Carver, the village clerk, and 2 members of the EMS department. Most likely, although it doesn't have to be the same people, most likely the person in charge of our narcotics, the narcotics officer, as well as the individual in charge of the patient care reports, the EPCRs, as well as our billing. This committee would meet monthly, and any issues that come back from the department that need to be addressed, whether it's something as seemingly mundane as supply ordering, if there are any issues with kind of the supply chain management side of that piece, all the way up to personnel issues, would come before this committee. And it would be an executive committee because of my presence on it, so we would be able to make certain decisions without board approval. But it would allow for more ongoing oversight of the ambulance department. Long-term, my hope is that we will find an appropriate white-collar style medical professional who wants to run the department. But I actually, the more I think about it, the more I believe that this committee will continue even once that individual is found and hired. It is, at the end of the day, it is healthcare. It is approaching $1 million in budget, probably a few years from now. It is by far the single largest department that the village operates. And of course, our contracts with the adjacent towns make it as much of a village department as it sometimes is also a collaborative. So with that in mind, the health consortium model, which is working very, very well, might be one to try to follow here with respect to how the department is managed, where we have this board, which acts as the kind of the board of directors, and then an executive committee that makes a lot of executive level decisions with the manager or the administrator once we have that person in place. So with that all being said, I would like to entertain a motion that we form this committee and appoint the people that I have previously mentioned effective immediately.
Yeah, I would absolutely make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to point out how much work that you guys have done in the interim of forming this committee. I mean, not that this will necessarily alleviate work, but it's very much appreciated.
Any other comment or discussion? Nancy has comments and questions.
I was just curious about your comment about alluding to it as a healthcare consortium model. That, as you well know better than most, is really a consortium of all of the partners who receive
Right.
service making joint decisions. So I
Right.
didn't know if you were alluding to that or not, because as a big payer,
Right.
we don't have much.
Yeah.
There's a just a contract.
I wasn't alluding to that specifically because there isn't a way to do that under a municipal department. At this point, structurally, if someone comes forward, if Albany comes forward with something that looks nicer, that would allow us to form a health consortium style model for ambulance service, they probably should be thinking about that. I'm going to try not to climb up on a soapbox right now, but they probably should be thinking about that because ambulance departments are disappearing all over New York State. So while the governor would love us to consolidate ourselves into oblivion, the reality is we're here and we provide the services Albany doesn't. So if we find a way to do that, great. Under the current structure, there isn't a way to do that. There isn't a way under village law to have partnership or joint decision-making. It doesn't exist. I'm not aware, although it's not to say it's impossible, I'm not aware of a specific section of the law that allows for intermunicipal governance of an ambulance service. I know that there are ways to do it through third parties. So, these are going to be long-term ongoing discussions. For the moment, what I meant by the health consortium model was simply in how it's run. So there's a very large, as you know, Nancy, there's a very large 40-member board of directors, and 30 of them show up 4 times a year, and it's really 5 or 6 people that make a lot of the decisions. This board is capable of making those decisions, but it's not really practical. And so if there's an issue on a Monday, how do we make a decision by Tuesday? I think that either for the last 3 months, it's been me. I think that it's better served by having this executive committee that can meet once or maybe twice a month if needed. And then again, once we have an administrator in place, they'll be making most of the day-to-day executive decisions, but we can maintain this oversight. Where this, I think, can be very helpful is in situations where there's an issue specific to towns, where it's not really a board-to-board contractual issue. It's more of a, hey, we're meeting with CARS to discuss X, Y, or Z. Who can we meet with from EMS? We'll now have kind of that oversight piece that is essentially a step down from the village board, but more flexible in terms of scheduling and discussions and what can be done that way. Any other comment or discussion? All right, then hearing none, all in favor of forming this EMS management committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next item I have is an update on the Trumansburg Deer Management Program. We haven't had one yet. It's been in place for this season from the first weekend of September and through last weekend, through December 1st. There have been 36 deer taken. Participants are out every weekend. That 36 count is above last year's pace for this time of year by a fair amount. So we're hopeful that will continue.
You don't happen to remember the preceding years, do you? Are we on pace to hit like the hundreds?
No. The first year was the biggest year at 94, I think, 94, 96. The second year saw the number 50 something comes to mind. And then the following 2 years were very low. Last year was up a little bit, and this year is above last year's pace. So I think at this pace, we're looking at, wildly guessing, we're looking at the 60 to 80 range. Seems unlikely we'll get up to the 90 some. But certainly an uptick from the last couple of years.
Are the deer getting slower? Are we getting more accurate?
That's a good question.
Ebbs and flows, I imagine. It's just
I think early cold helps. It was very warm early last year. And most of the deer taken last year were later in the season. So the early cold helps certainly on that side. So you can tell me what the weather will be like in January and February. We can
Snowfall slow down the deer? Does that help? Just curious.
No,
I
they move. They're on the move, certainly. They're on the move more.
Yeah.
They don't, when it's warm, they tend to bed down. The last item I have under my report is, I believe there was a news item last week. The state comptroller was in town over the summer. The last time the state comptroller audited the village was in 2001. Ironically, the village reached out to the comptroller's office in 2012, which was a year after we implemented ambulance billing. And we were also going through a change in the treasurer's office at the time. And so we asked the comptroller if they would please come to the village, audit us, because it had been over a decade, and specifically focus on the ambulance side of things, because billing was new to us. And we wanted to make sure we were doing things correctly. The comptroller's office politely declined and said, we'll get to you when we get to you. There's 700 municipalities in New York State, get in line. 6 years later, 2018, we received notification of a comptroller audit without any specific scope. The two gentlemen that I met with when they began the audit, very capable auditors, didn't have any decision as to what they were going to focus on. If anything, they were going to begin their audit in a very general fashion. But interestingly enough, they did decide after a few weeks of looking through everything that they wanted to focus on the ambulance fund and on billing. It's a little quirk of state finance law that when a municipality is being audited, they're not allowed to speak of it. When the draft report is released to the municipality, they're not allowed to disseminate it or discuss it in open meeting. Only when the final report is issued can we speak of it. So we've been going back and forth with the comptroller's office for the last few months discussing their findings. Essentially, their findings are that there were discrepancies in how monies received in billing were allocated back to the municipalities on whose behalf the billing was conducted. One of the concerns we had, and this is not to lay blame at all, but one of the concerns we had when we requested the audit in 2012 was, A, we'd never done this before, and B, we had significant concerns at the time that because of the nature of medical billing, particularly with respect to HIPAA, how do we reconcile medical claims submitted on behalf of a patient versus the money received for those claims, which are always different than what the bill is, versus municipal funds, which are supposed to funnel through the treasurer's office, who is not authorized necessarily to see patient information. So the decision that was made without the comptroller's guidance, and our third-party auditor who does our general auditing said, well, as long as the budget's balanced, it seems fine, was to keep receipts separate, which was correct. The comptroller agreed that keeping money received from insurance companies separate is good. And then the EMS manager, for HIPAA reasons, would reconcile the receipts with what was billed, and then would submit a report to the treasurer to disperse that money to the towns on whose behalf those receipts were received. And it seemed to work just fine. And overall, the discrepancy amounts to about 1% of the roughly $1.6 million that have been received, both for the village and the three towns since 2011. Our plan for how to make up overpayments to one particular town and underpayments to a couple of others is simply to make up the underpayment. I believe we'll do that in January. We'll get the numbers to Ulysses and Covert of what we're going to reimburse those towns for the amounts that were underpaid. And then we'll have a conversation with Hector about taking the amounts that they were overpaid and building it into their next year's budget contract. And as is the risk with running a department, we'll have to wait that time period to get that back. The good news is that the comptroller did find every penny, so we didn't have any concerns about where the money was going or was there misallocation of funds somehow. Every penny is accounted for, It's just that some of the remittances weren't accurately accounted for. The discrepancy itself seems to be, for the most part, due to the way fees were calculated to the third-party billing company. So MedX, which is the third-party billing company we use, keeps a portion of the billing revenue as their income. And it makes a difference when you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of calls over 7 years, whether you are factoring their fee on a per claim, per call, or per municipality rate. And that's why I'm not an auditor, is because they had the fellows from the comptroller's office had to go through 7 years of that to figure out where that discrepancy laid. And they did find it, so that's helpful. I did thank them both for helping us, because this is very helpful in terms of where are the lines between HIPAA and accounting rules, and what are some of the best practices to put in place, given the fact that the EMS department is growing in terms of call volume, growing in terms of billing revenue, so that we can more accurately account for everything going forward. The audit does require a action plan to be submitted within 90 days. In this case, it's fairly straightforward, fairly simple in terms of the recommendations they made to the village to better run the revenue generating side of the EMS department. If there are any questions about it, I would take them now. We don't have to wait till public comment period, but I did want to.
Well, I imagine we can also just share that report, right? So you guys can see the actual numbers when you're.
Right, we got to see in the weekly report that comes from the New York State Comptroller, they have a link to a brief summary of the report. But
Right.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's the report.
Oh, all right. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe that was it. It's very brief. It's not.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
8 pages, 4 pages. It's not much.
Yeah, their report, the data that feeds the report, they shared with Vicky in terms of, what is actually owed to Ulysses and Covert. Their public report, which is what they just released last week, is fairly short and to the point. All right.
I would be remiss in asking on behalf of my colleague, Mother Bonds, did they opine on the proper handling of money paid to the village from the towns, but not spent at the end of the fiscal year, and where that is accounted for?
They didn't opine, but I asked. And Steve, and what was the other one's name? Steve was the primary auditor. He's a nice guy, very kind of more laid back. Dave was much more emphatic, which was, I don't want to put words in the guy's mouth, but he basically said that, I don't want to get the guy in trouble. Village money is village money. When the village gets paid for something, it belongs to the village. And the notion, the idea that a payment for service is somehow allocated to that service when there's an underage is silly. But at the same time, he said, but you can do what you want with it. So if you want to give someone a rebate on next year's contract price, then that's up to you. But his opinion was that when anyone provides a service for a fee, that fee is income. And he did also confirm what I've said, which is if you make a mistake and you're short, that's on you. That's on the village. So it was less of an opining and more of an answer to a direct question. And primarily it was actually, we got off on a bit of a tangent that day. We were talking about water and so forth. So whether water revenue had any other potential purpose in the future kind of thing. right, item number 8 is acknowledgement of correspondence. The only thing that I'm aware that we received specifically for the full board was a formal request, which is in here somewhere.
Yeah, in support of planner. And then-
Excuse me. Yeah, where is it?
It's entitled
Oh, there
in
it is.
support of a village planner. Yeah.
Won't open for me. So if hopefully everyone else can open it. It is a formal request from the planning board to the village board in support of filling the position of village planner. No one is named. They're not requesting an individual, they're simply requesting that the position be filled. And so there it is under correspondence, but I know that we wanted to
Yeah,
have a discussion about it.
I'd like to take that up quite seriously. I think this has been a position we have a line item, a budget item for, and has been left kind of empty. I think we've considered a couple different options and kind of haven't made a real final decision any which way, but I'd like to kind of bring that up more formally now. I think there's a lot of benefits. Not only is our, planning board under a lot of water just from the projects before them, and this could be quite beneficial to them. And I know there's a lot of, extra effort and time that they're putting in. I'd like to help support them in that way. I think there's a number of issues that I've thought of and seen that could fall under kind of the broader umbrella of a planner. I think this board takes on quite a bit, which is a phenomenal resource for the village, and we get to move things kind of forward incrementally. But I think there's a lot that, we're kind of trying to juggle a bunch of hats and don't always get the time that we'd like to push some of these initiatives forward. I know a lot of the stuff that Keith and I have been doing on kind of the environmental and energy initiatives could benefit from someone who's in the office more regularly. Some of the stuff around stormwater management, looking for further funding for sidewalks, someone to help support the comp plan and zoning revision committee. I think there's a bunch of different places we could see someone slot in. So I think it's something we should really seriously consider. I did put in the Dropbox the job description from the county site for just a planner. I believe I found the proper one. So it's in there. I know that I kind of put that in late, but people could peruse that at their leisure. I guess I'd be interested to hear where other people are at. I don't know if we're ready as a board to kind of say, yes, let's go post this, but I thought we could have a kind of a conversation about it. Take people's temperature. If people are interested, we could move forward more directly on that.
I think we should absolutely post it. Yeah, I think initially I was somewhat deterred because the town's sort of part-time planner, I guess mistakenly, I was under the impression that he was, it was just going to be a very smooth, he was going to walk across the street when the full-time guy came and he was replaced, and that didn't work out exactly that way. Which is somewhat disappointing because it sounds like he was fairly good.
Right, and I do think I may have gotten that person's name from Liz, and we could reach out to someone more temporarily or in a kind of interim position if we felt that was important. I'm interested in having someone more full-time, and I guess I got the sense from him that was.
He was definitely only interested in a part-time position, and it seems like, we reached out and asked him to apply, right? Didn't you talk with him? Or maybe through Liz, I'm forgetting his name, do you?
Was this?
I did not know.
Let me see if I had
Right, yeah.
there was John
That
Skanowski.
sounds, yeah. I don't remember.
I wasn't aware of us reaching out. We may have, and
Well, I know that Liz encouraged him to apply, that we were looking into,
yeah.
maybe not to apply directly, but to reach out, and it sounds like he never did. But
Mhm.
it doesn't really matter for the sake of today's discussion. I would say we should certainly post the listing.
Well, our line right now is a part-time. It's a part-time position, and we could. I'd be happy to reach out to John and kind of point him that we have something posted.
It's worth doing. Like I said, I know that Liz sort of directed him to us, but maybe reaching out to him changes the paradigm.
Yeah.
If he doesn't have to reach out. So, but I don't know. I'd be inclined to see what we get if we just post it. I don't mind saying that there is pressure on the home front, to make this happen. So any movement that goes in that direction would be
Right, I mean, we're certainly not obligated to hire just because we posted it.
Right.
But we can't hire if we don't post it, so there's that catch 22.
Having just gone through a very challenging process with the resources department, trying to fill our plan position, I would encourage you to look at, there's a generic planner position, and then there's a planner for towns,
Mhm.
so that may be what you're.
I noticed the both and I wasn't
Yeah,
entirely
I would
clear on the
look at
difference.
The most flexible title for you,
Mhm.
because our position that we were trying to refill was an environmental planner position. And we were numerous extremely well qualified people who were blocked at the Human Resources Department from ever even expressing their interest to us.
Mhm.
And as a way around it, we were trying